So my estranged father reached out to me recently, and I'm just needing opinions on whether I did the right thing or not, because I've been getting heaps of flack for how I reacted. Just for some background, he and I have not talked in over 8 years. This was him kicking me out when I was 21, and having just graduated college, so I lived at home for a few months, then got my first job, saved up some cash, maybe found an apartment. When I was 7, my parents split up, and then when I was 17, my dad began dating Becca, who is now his wife. My stepmother was also married, but her husband died 6 years before she started to date mine. She had another daughter from that relationship, and was my stepsister Alexa, who was 4 years younger than me. When I first met Becca and Alexa, they gave me a weird vibe that made it seem like meeting me was the worst thing to ever happen in their lives. I reasoned that maybe they were just shy and no longer thought much about it. But the more time I spent with them, the less it seemed they liked me. Becca and Alexa lived with us for a year after that, but to put it into context, I moved out for college that same fall. I did not spend much time around them at home, so whenever I returned home for the holidays, family was all I could actually see, and it seemed like every time they would act very strange around me. They were married by my 2nd year. They still hardly liked me, though. There are no words to really describe it, but they just never seemed happy when I was around, and looked so much happier once my father and I left him. When I graduated and moved back home with the plan of staying there for a while, saving some cash so my next move could be permanent, it was when we were together in plenty that I knew what needed to happen. As much as before, I'd wanted nothing more than to avoid unpleasantness between us, and go on living under his roof without leaving a wake too stormy even he could not ride out. But whenever I brought it up to him, he said that I was imagining things, and Becca and Alexa loved me. And I did believe him and went back home. And in another 2 weeks he was wrong. For sure they did not love me, if anything actively hated having me there. She was always cold to me, and barely even acknowledged that I existed. I got the impression that Alexa had it in for me, incessantly teasing and provoking to fight. I tried bringing it up with my dad a few times, but they were acting much differently in front of him, and his conclusion was always just that I was imagining things, or that they were probably just adjusting to having me there. This lasted for about 2 months, and no matter how I tried to not be in their way, they found an agenda that made my life uncomfortable. Eventually, I even stopped whining to my father about it, because frankly, there was no use in doing that. I was saving up to be able to move out, but Becca and Alexis came home that day, gaslighting me into believing I stole $9,000 from my college tuition fund. On one such afternoon, I had done the house hunting thing with 2 of my buddies, and since Becca wanted nothing to do with me for obvious reasons, while Alex has literally sent her entire family a link on YouTube about how there is no objectivity in anything whatsoever, but people are self-aware, so that make that less Hippocratic staying at home was unbearable. By that evening I was back at home, where my dad had returned. He seemed very disappointed, and told me to just take my things and leave. Walking into the house, I was like, dang, what is happening? He said, whatever happened to me? All those years he never imagined it would end up in such lowliness and desperation by any decent human being for cash. I had no clue what the heck he was talking about, and tears were streaming down my face from him saying such cruel things. Instead of attempting to speak with me, he simply said that my mama act had no place here, and I should just leave now. Then, Becca walked into the room and began hollering at me that I was ruining Alexa's future by insisting Cooper made this all happen simply because he wanted to move on from Dad. I could thread together the story as she yelled at me about what I had done. It appeared they were charging me with fraud for stealing money from them only using a card that had been made available to assist in emergencies, when I used it instead on luxury goods. Becca said I had visited her a couple weeks ago and told her that my money was low, so she created for me an add-on on the account she'd been saving dollars to give Alexa. The account was now almost empty, and Alexa had no money to go to college. I had allegedly claimed I needed the cash for things that were far less scandalous than what her ex, my stepdad, swore up and down, bought me new bags, shoes, and clothes from stores cost way too much money to think of any good endeavor spending all my mother's money. I was distraught because none of what she said had occurred, and it made me pee with rage. I said, "Show me proof of all this." And my dad was like, "No need, because they had gone through the room a couple hours previously, found everything in there." That confirmed her story. He had discovered each of the things that I had gotten only with my card behind a wall in between packs stored covered under my bed. When I told my father that Becca had not even added me on the card, because trust me, if she did add me to a credit cards, because otherwise who would have tipped me off so well, he says, "Oh no." After a few hours, it was complete though. I said to him, he needed a proof other than this, but then said, that was all the evidence required for his lost daughter. A filthy and loathsome thief. I tried every way I could to convince him Becca wasn't telling the truth, but he didn't believe me. Eventually, I had to leave. I did not see my father after that day. He had shown me where his priorities were, and after the insulting way I had been degraded by, he was never going to be a person that would hear from me. I bunked with a friend for several days until I secured an apartment, managed my finances really poorly for the next couple of months, and then learnt to survive on minimal cash. I live a relatively decent life now, and I am planning to purchase my own home in 2 months. For 8 years, I have cut off all ties to my father and avoided any family gathering on his side, like he was contagious, because I simply never wanted to see him. My mom and I have remained in touch. She had discarded my father around the same time as me due to how he treated me. I think she's in his camp right now, so I'm confused. Anyhow, a few days ago my dad dropped in to see me at home, so I opened the door to hear him out, as I was curious about what he had to say. He said that he had obtained the address from my mother. According to him, he was here because he had come down to apologize for all of it, and until recently found out that my stepmom made up the whole thing just so someone could pay Alexa's college fund. When he found out, the poor bastard had no idea that for years his wife was using him just to support herself with money they thought he only earned by being a good dad. Yet from what he had just learned about his in-laws, he needed me to forgive him and allow him a chance. It seems that Becca had fought with her parents 2 months back, and then they contacted my dad, this was after he'd kicked me out, to tell him the whole truth about what happened. As I eventually suspected, she had purchased all those items for her and her daughter, as the clothes still had tags on them that read Lerv, but hid it in my room to pin a tale of me being suspicious. To add insult to injury, she even had her parents call me pretending they were bank employees, convincing my dad that yes, in fact, he added me as an additional card holder. The actual fact that led to her illicit activities was the one who murdered the college fund, which her deceased husband had been saving for Alexa, with an extravagant lifestyle. She was adamant that she never wanted to ask my father to pay for her expenses, and not wanting a reputation of being just out for the money anyway, hated me because I made things complicated with him. And that's why she always hated me. That's how she plotted, to eliminate me, but also use it as a means by which my father would end up freely committing the money for college. That helped her kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Her parents had said nothing for 8 years after that plan worked. And recently, owing to their quibbling, for they'd been engaged in an endless rant of late, which had the entire household in a scandalized uproar, they decided at last it was time to exhume old skeletons, and this way tell my father some truths. A few weeks back, he said he'd filed for a divorce from her with his old lawyer, and today he'd come to patch things up with me. He knew one of my friend's fathers was a very respected divorce attorney, and that I should do my daughterly duty by calling him up to put him in touch with her dad. My dad also wanted me to sign up with a lawyer, who would agree to cut his fees down for her, because Becca and the attorney he talked was so absurdly one-sided in their petition. It was so ridiculous that I actually laughed in his face before closing the door. I never thought he was indeed under the impression that he'd swing by, say sorry to me, and I'd hook him up with whatever it sounded like. We would again simply move on. Naturally, I wasn't about to do any sort of aid whatsoever. If he wanted to hire my friend's father as a lawyer, then that means he'd have to, contact him himself and pay what everyone else does. His old lawyer was not up to the task, yes, but that wasn't my problem 4 months before Thanksgiving 1999. The advise's time and $250,000 were 2 things I didn't have in November or December 99. I couldn't help it if his previous attorney investigator got too scared because this case looked complicated and he wanted retirement instead of challenge. So when I slammed the door in his face and told him to leave or I'd call the cops on his ass, I thought everything had been said, already. However, my mom had called me up afterwards and told me that I was wrong. But when she said that, suddenly siding with my dad's side, I mean, honestly, who even knows why the hell she's on his teams now? And it just made me super upset again, because part of what I'm going through is already hard enough without some family member telling you they disagree about following your gut over jumping into action and helping someone out. She said we were all human, and my dad was just like us. It wasn't fair for me to hold him up on a pedestal where I didn't allow the normalcy of mistakes, because he was my father. It was not that I minded him trusting his wife and having aged poor, even though who by then had been married for years, as an affair, but rather he trusted her more than me, his daughter. I will never forget how he called me disgusting and a desperate lowlife the day he threw my belongings out of our house. He had raised me. He knew me, arguably better than I did. Even so, she felt I was capable of doing something that nasty, the very thing he accused me. It was the fact that he wasn't just saying sorry 8 years later, but asking for my help. He probably wouldn't have come to apologize if he didn't need my help. Here he was doing the exact same behavior that I hated him for more than any feeling here, and it took me 8 years to figure out he'd fucked up. I did my best to explain this fact of acceptance to my mother, who just kept repeating how he had admitted his wrongdoing. And if that happened 50 years post-event, hey, it counted for something. I should just let him off and be the bigger person, because really I have to help this guy. What I mean is that even if I wanted to, think what? Mind you, I am really close with my friend, and feel confident that if I ask him to talk to his dad about this, he will work it out with mine. However, I doubt that I'll be able to persuade them into lowering their rate since the best divorce attorney in town comes at a price. So what would make me even commit to something that I am not sure I'd be able to pull it off? My mom and I ended up debating it for around 30 minutes, both us irritated with each other on the phone by this point. I did not believe she made sense, and for that reason I was really confused at what it is even she meant. But ultimately she just refused to understand my perspective. And now we are not talking to each other either, and I am wondering if I did wrong or right. I mean, I do not believe that what I've done with my dad was too awful, but be the impact of how she or rather started to react. Am I the asshole for not helping my estranged father with his divorce? I am wise enough to stay away from both my parents. In the comments, you all are right. I do not owe my father nothing after he treated me. The fact that he did apologize to me less than weeks after finding out the truth just proves he wouldn't have apologized if it weren't for him needing my help. Thanks to all those who commented. I really needed that. And my mother, well, I really don't know why she was being so firm and taking my dad's side after years not speaking to him, but also did this indeed need it. It was over the phone call that I asked him if she had been talking to my dad and whether she is in touch with my father. She said no. However, for the last 8 years after kicking me out, she hadn't communicated with my father. However, he was the one who contacted her on that day back in October when I had slammed the door of his face. She told me that he was upset, so she agreed to listen. Because my dad is not the most emotional of men, and it takes a lot to make him cry, she asked what was happening that made her dad ring up. That's how I found out what really happened when he was trying to talk me it. Other than that, she said, he had not spoken to her in the 8 years prior. Now looking back, I find that hard to believe since she has been in the exact same spot as me, and it would have made her more difficult at forgiveness of him. This incident must have either reunited them or made them feel pity for each other, and I remember when my parents divorced, they were really good friends, did co-parenting kind of thing. Whatever it is, my mom's reaction told me, she doesn't know me as well I thought she did, and no one really gets who I am. If she did, then why would have she gotten angry at me for not forgiving my dad right away? In any case, I'm not getting into the middle of either one. Not talking to my dad will not be difficult since I already have, for 8 years. I mean, I just feel like that's going to be really hard not interacting with my mom either. She was basically the only family I knew for years, and now she's gone too. I hate that, but again, not much I can do. I'm waiting a week before I get my father to contact her and find out what she has to say about this. It's not too late for her to come back to reality in that time frame. And if she doesn't, I have no idea what I'll do either. After that, I may have to sever ties altogether, and the thought of that makes me really sad. I know I have to look out for number one too, but it kills me not doing so. Wow. Update 2. All right, so the week has not passed yet, but my mom did call me. Unfortunately, it was not in regret. I didn't really block her on anything because I wanted to know if she would actually talk with me or not, and well, she did. Yesterday she texted me asking if she can come and talk to me in person. She thinks it's better this way. I agreed for her to come over because I wanted some closure regarding that, and thought she was going to apologize. I was fairly cordial with her when she came over and such. It begins. She said she had been reflecting on our last discussion, and perhaps not trying to fully understand me, which brought her back to do the KC on that conversation. It seemed strange that she was forcing me to repeat the same things, but I did anyways in hopes of helping her understand better where I stood, and maybe it would get easier for her to apologize towards too, just so we could finalize this once is for all. However, after I said everything about how I felt about the whole situation, she told me that now we discussed this calmly and openly. She'd like to have sit down for a discussion with my father. She knew I could answer with poise rather than door slamming, and she would not allow my dad to go without a reason for everything. When he thought I had stolen Becca's money, he did not call the cops on me, and even convinced Becca to not. It doesn't matter that all of it was made up. The important part is that he did his absolute best to keep me safe, despite thinking I was in the wrong. The least I could do was let him talk to me. She also stated she had raised her good-hearted daughter, who wasn't saying no on this. However, I told her that she didn't know me as well as she thought she did, and my father was a horrible person who had treated the people in his life with cruelty. I didn't owe him anything, not even an explanation. I am really angry about her not even on this apologizing to me, so I told her all that after you have only written, because she wants apologize. Otherwise, I did not wish to talk with her. Then she started squirming and told me I shouldn't behave like this, as family is everything, at the end of day. If there is no sense that they could ever forgive us when we are wrong, then it will be a torturous existence for us. I thought this was just a load of crap, and that I didn't want to talk to her or discuss all these things any longer. So I asked her to leave. That was when she told me, for the last time, that she couldn't leave, because she'd promised my father to get me talking to him. She couldn't go. I had to at least talk with him one time. She need to keep her promises, and then... She pushed me to make amends with my father. She said she didn't want to lose me, and that was just really sorry I felt my mom and dad let down. But at the end of day, you're my parents and I need to stop being bitter. 'Cause really, what little wrongs they had done doesn't even begin compare with everything else right in the past. That matters, and that counts for something. I told her it was ridiculous that she even said those things. I also told her indeed, it was your mistake for having made promises with my father, and you did not even realize you do have the ability to live up to them. It was none of my concern to ensure she kept her promise. Once again I told her to leave, but then she finally said, "No, my dad was in the car outside waiting to be called into the house." She could not disappoint him. That was when I lost it and began yelling at my mother, because this only crossed a line. I had told her in no uncertain terms I did not want to talk to my dad, and she took it upon herself to bring him here, absolutely sure that she'd get me into a talking mood. Of course, I lost my temper. I started screaming at her. I told her what a bad mother she was, and it was over. Being mad, I didn't even care that she started crying. I kept screaming at her to get out, and she just repeatedly apologized for everything, but I wasn't in the mood. After her argumentative every minute, she finally left after 15 minutes. I was shouting at her, saying that if she or my father came back again, I would have them arrested. Then I proceeded to block her, and I'm possibly going to consult a lawyer about placing one of those protective orders against these people if they ever come back around. Update 3. Well, literally the craziest thing happened today. I don't even know how to tell someone about it, and that is why I am here talking about it, because I really need to say this. Today I was at home instead of working, because it is my day off, and for that reason I planned on doing nada. And then Becca and Alexa arrived. But wait, that is not the craziest thing to happen today. When I found out they were standing outside my door, of course, you know that was infuriating. So when friends say, "Hey, your favorites are here," or whatever telling them to get the hell away. I had even actually called a cop, but Becca explained to me that she was there not harassing my father and why he needed help. Liked as awful and foul-mouthed as always, it was gratifying to realize she hadn't modified a stitch in 8 years. However, initially I had no desire to talk with her, so when she infiltrated my life and started saying whatever it was that needed some kind of response from me and answer, I told her I wasn't interested. This was followed by her saying that if I knew what she had come to tell me, and asked for an explanation on why my mom suddenly turned sides after not having spoken a word with my dad in years. Honestly, I woed when was supposedly not going to lie and thought she would know any of this. I was so curious to know just what the hell had happened, and finally, after some internal debate about whether or not I should let her in, did. But she would not step foot in my house, claimed it was only by the skin of her teeth this visit that she came here to tell me a truth, and then leave again with her girl standing just outside my door. A couple of weeks back, my parents had told my father the truth about something that happened 8 years ago, and they ended up in a huge fight over it. He straight went for a divorce. She had been arguing with her parents because she stopped sending them money every month like before, 'cause even my father wasn't giving her the allowance that sufficed. In case anybody was wondering what exactly happened, she got a little greedy. If my father decreased her allowance without reason, she did a little detective work, only ultimately wonder that my dad was cheating on Mom. Then, she figured out he probably intended to leave her. Why else would he have been saving up money? So she chose to be with him, and eventually divorce him on her terms. Everything went down during the entire fight, when my dad found out what really happened before she had a chance to do that. They both discovered the truth about each other. Normally, my dad could have cut Becca out of the marriage with little more than a, "Well, this happened," from his attorney. However, since he too had committed adultery and cheated on her, and Becca hadn't worked in almost a decade, she wrote up the petition that was beneficial to her. And that is why they were currently at each other's throats, because he was not all right with it. She was telling me all this because, apparently in the days prior, my father had gotten on her case over the phone with threats to stay out of his business, or I would be calling a divorce attorney, and he would even more than likely find himself unemployed. Sure, he was bluffing, but Becca definitely didn't want to take that chance. Well, that's one way to put it. So she had come to tell me the truth. I was genuinely astonished that all of this had occurred, but in some way I felt relieved, because at least now I knew what caused my mother to behave so oddly regarding my father. When Becca had told me everything she wanted, all that remained was for her to say it was my choice, and then go. For the first time in her life, she had been a reason of some real assistance to me, and for that I am thankful. After this, there is absolutely no way that I am ever going to maintain contact with my parents again. Can you believe Mom actually tried to gaslight me into thinking Dad deserved a second chance because she wanted or needed him back so badly? My parents are really meant for each other. They indeed fit together like a glove, and I am rather thankful to no longer be part of their lives. Well, now I am going to be on my own, and thank the stars that it was me who had enough sense not to forgive any of them. Update 4. Hello. It has been 2 months since my last post here, and everyone wanted to know how I was doing. It has been quite good, and I'm happy on my own. Sometimes I do miss my mother, and then I remember how she lied to me, and it makes her absence a little bit easier. From a few relatives, I learned my father is back with my mother again, as if nothing happened, and also he recently had his divorce finalized. Honestly, I don't know exactly what he lost in the divorce that followed, and am careful to keep it that way. A few relatives are attending my parents' wedding soon. They wanted me to be aware of it, because I might want to show up and right their wrong with them. But I do not actually care, and surely don't wish to be on good terms with them. I am better and happier solo. So that is where my life currently,